The Kurdish people, the largest ethnic group in the world without a country, took a step toward statehood when 92% of Kurds voted in favor of independence. And as Chris Mitchell reports from Erbil, the question remains what will happen in the Middle East after the referendum and how the Trump administration will respond to the yes vote.
After the vote, Kurds took to the streets to celebrate their claim to a country of their own. Hours earlier, they took to the polls. Many came in Kurdish dress and made it a family affair.
These Kurds are exercising their right to vote for independence for the first time. For many, it's one more step in a long history toward a free and independent Kurdistan.
Even though 14-year-old Soma couldn't vote, she came with her family and expressed the hopes of the Kurdish people.
If you're a Kurd, this is a special day for you because you're going to be free from now on. If you like, I hope everybody votes for that because it's really special for me.
This is a people achieving a dream they've had for 100 years.
Former Ambassador Peter Galbraith compares the Kurds of today to Americans more than 200 years ago.
They're not asking anything from the Americans except for the Americans to accept that the Kurds have the same right that Americans had in 1776. Only the Kurdish complaints against Iraq are much bigger than the American complaints against George III.
The U.S. opposed the referendum. Retired General Jay Garner says this State Department position is based on the one Iraq policy, which would keep Kurdistan under the influence of the Iranian-backed government in Baghdad.
If we cause the Kurds to stay in the Republic of Iraq, one, we give them to the Iranians. Two, we complete the Shia arc that goes from Tehran through Iran, through Syria, into Lebanon, and wreaks terror on Israel.
Galbraith says this policy puts the U.S. on the wrong side.
To insist on the unity of Iraq under a government in Baghdad that is Iran's closest ally in the world, that created a militia which is commanded by General Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, and which is on Kurdistan's borders. And instead of siding with the Kurds, the Trump administration siding with Iran and General Qasem Soleimani.
Galbraith and Garner say the Kurds could stop Iran's reach and be a haven for Christians.
The place that has been protecting Iraq's Christians, the Christians of the Middle East, is Kurdistan.
The Kurds face hostile neighbors opposed to their independence. But that doesn't stop Kurds like Soma dreaming of a free Kurdistan.
It would be a really happy place for Kurd people to be free. It would be special.
And now, joining us from Erbil is Chris Mitchell. Shalom, Chris. Greetings from Jerusalem. We saw in your report that the Kurds voted overwhelmingly for independence. But what will happen now?
Julie, great to be with you from Erbil, the capital of Kurdistan. And the big question is now, as you said, is what is going to happen now after the successful referendum? Many people are looking at two countries. First of all, Iran, as I've been hearing, has been trying to fill the vacuum here in Kurdistan. And so that's a very ominous development for the Kurds and for the Christians in the area. The other country that's very pivotal is the United States. And I've been hearing that if the Trump administration came out in support of a strong, free, and independent Kurdistan, that they would get their independence. You have to remember that after World War I, there was a promise by the nations that they could have an independent state, and that never materialized. And you should also remember that after ISIS came in 2014, it was the Kurds that took over thousands of refugees, even while they were under siege.
So, Chris, what's the relationship of the Kurds to Israel?
Well, Israel and the Kurds have a unique relationship. In fact, it was Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu who was the only leader in the free world to actually come out and support Kurdish independence. The United States opposed it, Iran, Turkey, the Baghdad government, they all opposed it, but Israel stood behind the Kurds. There's an interesting relationship, too, because many Jews here in Kurdistan, when they were under persecution, it was the Kurds that actually helped thousands of them get back to Israel. There's thousands of Jews inside Israel right now with Kurdish background. So there's a very close affinity between Israel and the Kurdish people. Sometimes that relationship is overt, like when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu came out in support, but many times it's covert. There has been reports of the Israeli Secret Service, the Mossad, having relationship here and supporting the Kurds. Many times that's not reported on, but there is a strong relationship between Israel and the Kurdish people.
Chris, we saw in your reports on Facebook that you visited a couple of churches. What's the plight or the situation of the Christians in the area?
Well, Julie, ever since we started reporting here in 2014, it's been a desperate situation for Christians. When in 2014, 3 years ago, they were fleeing for their lives. Now, many of them still are displaced. For example, we were in a church service just the other night where hundreds of Christians had gathered. They're still in a refugee camp 3 years after they fled their homes. Some of them would like to go back to villages like Bartilla and Karakosh and Mosul, but sometimes their homes have been destroyed by ISIS or because of the fighting. And they would like to go to other countries sometimes, but that may not be possible. So it's a very important time to be supporting the Christians here in this area by prayer, obviously, but also by action. There's some legislation in the United States Congress right now that would try to provide a safe zone for Christians in the Nineveh Plain. So that's certainly, you could call your congressman about that to help support the Christians, but certainly still a desperate time for our brothers and sisters in Christ here in this area.
How important are our prayers, and what should we be praying for in the region?
Well, I would say that prayer is one of the most important things can do for what's happening here, not only for our brothers and sisters, and that's certainly something that we need to do, to pray for their protection, to pray that they could have a new life, whether here in their villages like Batel or Karakosh or Mosul or other places, and also the action that can be done on their behalf, but also prayer for the geopolitics in the region. We talked to a Norwegian pastor the other day that cited Acts 17, where God sometimes redraws borders, and the reason for that redrawing the borders is that so men may seek him. And so it's very important to be praying not only for individuals, for the workers that are doing spreading the gospel here, for the priests and the other workers, but also for the geopolitics, that God would have his way and purposes here in this land.
Thank you, Chris, for your excellent reporting from Kurdistan. Be safe.